I carried a secret for 3 years that my family never suspected because I finally learned the power of silence. The truth is that staying quiet during our chaotic family dinners was the only thing keeping my sanity intact. My name is Valerie, and at 34 years old I have learned that some people only listen so they can find new ways to judge you. I grew up in a modest house in a small town outside of Nashville where my mother counted every penny even when our bank account finally started to grow. My younger sister Savannah was born 2 years after me, and she quickly became the golden child who could absolutely do no wrong in our parents' eyes. Savannah always possessed an effortless charm that allowed her to glide through life while I navigated the difficult hurdles. She managed to secure a high-paying marketing job right out of college while I chose the unpredictable path of building my own graphic design business from scratch. Our parents constantly praised her corporate success and predictable lifestyle, while they viewed my freelance career as a phase that would eventually end in failure. Whenever we gathered for holidays, the conversation invariably revolved around Savannah's latest promotion or her expensive vacations, while my achievements were completely dismissed. This toxic dynamic taught me to keep my personal life entirely to myself to avoid their inevitable criticism and harsh judgment. The real test of my new boundaries arrived last month when my mother insisted we celebrate Savannah's engagement at an upscale downtown restaurant. I dreaded these formal gatherings because they always turned into a showcase for my sister's perfection and my apparent shortcomings. My long-term boyfriend Vance could not join us due to a sudden work emergency, which left me completely vulnerable to their coordinated verbal attacks. Walking into that brightly lit dining room felt like stepping directly into a trap, but I promised myself I would remain calm. I took a deep breath and sat down across from my sister, who was already flashing her massive diamond ring. The evening began exactly as I expected, with my mother loudly praising Savannah's fiance and his incredibly wealthy family. They talked about the exclusive country club wedding venue and the designer dress that cost more than my first car. I kept my head down and focused on my salad while trying to tune out the overwhelming arrogance radiating from across the table. When my father asked how my little art projects were doing, I simply smiled and said things were moving along nicely without offering any details. My refusal to engage frustrated my mother, because she thrived on dissecting my struggles and offering backhanded compliments under the guise of maternal concern. The pleasant facade shattered completely when Savannah leaned across the table with a malicious gleam in her eyes and brought up my living situation. She asked if Vance and I were still renting that cramped apartment down by the railroad tracks because she had some old furniture to donate. My mother chimed in immediately and lectured me about how real stability meant owning property instead of wasting money every month on a temporary lease. I felt the familiar heat rising in my chest, but I forced myself to take a slow sip of water instead of snapping back. They had no idea that Vance and I had actually closed on a beautiful 4-bedroom house just last week. We had spent the last 2 years quietly saving every single dollar from my growing business to buy our dream home without anyone interfering. We deliberately kept the entire house hunting process a secret because I knew my family would try to ruin the excitement with their endless negativity. Sitting at that table, I realized that my silence was actually a massive position of power because they were criticizing a reality that no longer existed. Savannah kept pushing for a reaction and asked why I looked so smug when my life was clearly standing still compared to hers. I smiled gently and told her that I was genuinely happy for her success and wished her the absolute best. My refusal to argue visibly agitated Savannah because she desperately needed to feel superior to fuel her own deep-seated insecurities. She cleared her throat loudly and announced that her fiancé was buying her a brand new luxury SUV as an early wedding present. My parents practically beamed with pride while my mother pointedly looked at me and sighed about the ancient sedan I still drove. Instead of getting defensive, I remembered the keys to my new electric vehicle sitting quietly inside my purse. The contrast between their false assumptions and my actual reality was becoming almost comical as the expensive dinner progressed toward the final course. The true climax of the evening occurred when the waiter accidentally brought the wrong credit card back to our table after my father tried to pay. The premium black card belonged to me, and it was placed right in front of Savannah, who immediately noticed my full name printed on the front. Her jaw dropped as she stared at the exclusive card that required an incredibly high annual income and an impeccable credit score to obtain. My mother snatched it away to inspect it closely and demanded to know how I could possibly afford such a luxury. I calmly took the card from her trembling hand and slipped it back into my wallet without offering a single word of explanation. The sudden silence at the table was absolutely deafening as my parents and sister struggled to process this massive shift in information. Savannah demanded to know if I was hiding a massive amount of debt, or if Vance was secretly funding my lifestyle behind the scenes. I looked her dead in the eye and stated that my business had simply experienced its most profitable quarter in history. I stood up from the table and thanked them for the lovely dinner before placing enough cash on the white tablecloth to cover the entire bill. As I walked away, I could hear my mother frantically calling my name, but I never turned around. That chaotic dinner taught me that true validation never comes from people who are dedicated to misunderstanding your worth. I drove back to my brand new home feeling lighter than I had in my entire life, because I finally broke the cycle of seeking their approval. My family still sends desperate text messages demanding answers about my finances, but I choose to leave them on read. I no longer feel the need to defend my choices or prove my success to people who only want to see me fail. True peace belongs to those who learn to thrive in silence while letting their ultimate success make all the noise.